'Twas the night before the budget when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Possibly the torpor is because Jeremy Hunt has suggested that although he would like to be like Nigel Lawson, Margaret Thatcher's famous Chancellor, he needs to be more prudent like Gordon Brown. However, the opposite is true. The Chancellor needs to be, must be like Nigel Lawson. The UK's tax system is a muddle, and it was a muddle that was created, devised and invented in many ways by Gordon Brown. It disincentivised growth and innovation, it's filled with bizarre anomalies, and it is in fundamental need of simplification and rationalisation. So first, the Chancellor ought to implement the following tax cuts. The corporation tax rise from 19 to 25% should be reversed. Similarly, the tourism tax that has stopped tourists from claiming back VAT on their purchases should be removed too. Today, Stuart Mackin, the chief executive of Marks & Spencer's, argued for the abolition of this harmful tax and went on to say that existing policy makes being an employer of people and running stores really hard. He also railed against the apprenticeship levy and the business rates model. The next tax in need of axing is inheritance tax. So I explained before, not only is inheritance tax rather sinister, as the taxman lurks visiting with the undertaker, but it also discourages investment. The Growth Commission has calculated that its abolition would boost GDP by 1.3% and bring 300,000 people back into the workforce. Fiscal drag is another problem. It means that cutting headline rates won't end up being a real cut. And it would be better to deal with some of the anomalies that have arisen through the banding system that we have. And there are many anomalies within our system. As I've discussed before, some people in Britain pay marginal tax rates of over 60%, owing to quirks in childcare and tax-free allowances. We should make a rule that no one's marginal rate should ever exceed that of the top income tax rate of 45%. But with tax cuts, we need spending cuts too. Indeed, one of the main reasons the Chancellor didn't have the headroom that was previously expected was because of increased borrowing costs, partly because the inert Bank of England has not started cutting rates. We should also remove any bailouts to local councils. Just look what we were hearing about Birmingham. They've shown that they cannot be trusted to use public money effectively. A radical transformation of our benefit system is needed. We have 5.5 million working-age people on out-of-work benefits, which is £180 billion of taxpayer expenditure. But it's also a waste of human as well as economic potential. Shift in incentives is needed to cut into this spending, saving money and enabling tax cuts. 20 billion is currently being spent on carbon capture, an experimental technology that is yet to be shown to be particularly efficient. When you add all of this to the vast sums of Whitehall waste and net zero spending and public sector spending, there's plenty of headroom to be made to afford serious tax cuts. So my advice to Jeremy Hunt is, if we want to win the next election, unleash Britain's growth and improve everyone's standard of living. Be Nigel Lawson, not Gordon Brown. As ever, let me know your thoughts, mailmog@gbnews.com. And I'm delighted to be joined now by Jonathan Portes, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College London. Jonathan, thank you for coming back on. You're always very welcome. What would you be advising the Chancellor to do? Do you think he should be like Gordon Brown?
No, and I agree with you. The tax system needs to be reformed and simplified. Both Gordon Brown and George Osborne have made it considerably more complicated, and some of the issues around the high marginal rates at the top are absolutely right. However, in overall money terms, this isn't a huge amount of money. What the Chancellor should do is plug some of the really gaping holes in our public services. Homelessness has shot up over the last 15 years. We are letting criminals out of jail early because there's no room for them. The courts and criminal justice system, as we know, are at the point where they are clogged up with delays. And while it's true that some, not all, but some local councils have not managed their finances well, although I would say they've in general managed them a lot better than the government in which you served, which has wasted far more money, it is nonetheless the case that a lot of councils from all parties, Conservative, Labour and No Control, are on the verge of going bust simply because they cannot afford to fund services for vulnerable children and social care, which are by far the vast bulk of what council
But
spend.
that's very generous of you, though, isn't it? Because a lot of them have made really silly property investments because they could borrow money cheaply. Just today, the government, Simon Hall, the minister at DLUC, has written to the West of England Combined Authority to say that it isn't performing satisfactorily in terms of its financial controls. There are councils up and down the country that are spending money really poorly and not on sensible priorities.
Well, that's true. The Thurrock Council, for example, when under Conservative control, did waste a huge amount of money and go bankrupt on absolutely bizarre schemes. So there is a bit of that, but there's actually rather more of that in central government, to be honest. And the main point, however, is that even councils which are extremely well run and efficient are facing the pinch because of the pressure on cost from children's services, from homelessness, which, of course, as I said, the government has allowed to get out of control. It was brought under control in the 2000s, and the government has unfortunately allowed it to get completely out of control again, and on social care.
I'm very interested in this point on homelessness or rooflessness, because it was brought under control during the pandemic as well. And I don't really understand. I actually had a meeting earlier on today with an organisation from Bath that tries to help people who are roofless. What has gone wrong? Why has it gone back to the levels of rooflessness that we saw many years ago?
It is because government has essentially taken its eye off the ball. It doesn't require a huge amount of money. It requires some money, but it's not mostly about money. It's about political will, targeting some money, working with local councils and precisely the sort of voluntary group that you're talking about, and saying, we will ensure that there is a bed for everybody. And
but
once you say that...
Sorry to interrupt, but it is fundamentally a local authority issue. And I know that Westminster City Council, Labour-run now, is extremely good at dealing with homelessness if they can persuade people to take up the services there. There is a room for everybody in Westminster.
Yes, councils that have sufficient resources, sufficient the sufficient capacity in the voluntary sector locally, as you said, and have the political will from whatever party can do it. But it does also require pressure from government to say, look, we are a relatively rich country. We know we can control this problem if we take it seriously, and that's what we're going to do.